this country are following the law? If that's what they're afraid of, then we don't want to join them, Mr. Speaker. I urge my colleagues to vote no on the rule, no on the underlying bill, so the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau can do its job without Congress getting in the way, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from New York yields back her time. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Congress has an opportunity today to ensure that we protect consumers and American business, both. Additionally, we have an opportunity to ensure the safety and soundness of financial institutions in the United States. That's what we're here to do also. Reforms to the CFPB are necessary and, I believe, timely. Congress must and has a responsibility to do everything that we can to encourage economic growth, jumpstart the free enterprise system, and put Americans back to work. Growing our economy and slowing federal spending will be the best way that we can work together to get our economy back on track and get out of rising debt and also of the financial malaise that's underway. This legislation provides for some of these necessary steps. I applaud my colleagues. I thank my colleagues also on the Republican side who were here to not only defend what we're doing, but to talk about the need for such action. This bill that we're facing here today has the support of the Chairman of the Financial Services Committee, Chairman of the Rules Committee, and I applaud them for providing such an open and transparent process. I also encourage a yes vote on the rule, and I move the previous question on the resolution.
Back.
I do.
All time having expired, without objection, the previous question is ordered. The question is an adoption of the resolution. All of those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, on that I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 359 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 58, House Resolution 359. Resolved, that at any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved unto the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill H.R. 2551, making appropriations for the legislative branch for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2012, and for other purposes. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. The bill shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill for failure to comply with Clause 2 of Rule 21 are waived. No amendment to the bill shall be in order except those printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution, and except pro forma amendments offered at any time by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations or their respective designees for the purpose of debate. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. All points of order against such amendments are waived. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill to the House with such amendments as may have been adopted. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and amendments thereto to final passage without intervening motion, except one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
The gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Fox, is recognized for 1 hour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Polis, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume. During consideration of this resolution, all time yielded is for the purpose of debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
House Resolution 359 provides for a structured rule for consideration of H.R. 2551, the fiscal 2012 Legislative Branch Appropriations Bill. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of this rule providing for consideration of H.R. 2551. This rule represents a continuance of fulfilling the new Republican majority's pledge to implement a more open legislative process in providing for consideration of a bipartisan list of 16 amendments, which is more than at any time dating back to at least 1988. 12 amendments were made in order in both the second session of the 103rd Congress and first session of the 104th. This is in stark contrast to the past 2 Congresses in which Democrat domination of this House provided for a collective grand total of 4 amendments that were allowed to be debated during the past 4 years, when 3 were made in order during the first session of the 110th and 1 in the first session of the 111th. In fact, even considering a legislative branch appropriations bill is a change of pace from Democrat control, when 2 years yielded no consideration of standalone funding legislation, the second sessions of both the 110th and 111th Congresses. In other words, with the consideration of this single rule and bill, the House Republican majority is making in order 4 times as many amendments on standalone legislative branch appropriations legislation as were provided for in the previous 4 years of liberal Democrat House domination combined. Given the terrible budgetary mess we inherited from the liberal Democrats, the underlying bill reflects the Republican House majority's continued drive for restoring the fiscal restraint that is so desperately needed in this city. The bill appropriates $3.3 billion for legislative branch entities, including $1.2 billion for House operations and $2.1 billion for legislative branch agencies and other offices, including the Capitol Police, Congressional Budget Office, the Library of Congress, the Government Accountability Office, and Government Printing Office. This total is $227 million, or 6% less than the current funding, and $472 million, or 9% less than requested by the offices and agencies covered by this bill. The cuts come on top of the 2.5%, or $115 million cut from fiscal year 2010, contained in H.R. 1473, which was the fiscal year 2011 continuing resolution deal that was ultimately signed into law. The bill provides $4.5 billion for that bill, provided $4.5 billion for the legislative branch, including a reduction of $55 million in funding for the House from the year before, and provide a 5% cut in member committee and leadership office expenses, except for the Appropriations Committee, which offered a larger 9% cut. At this point, Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert at this place in the record a budgetary outline of H.R. 2551.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Even with all these funding reductions, it's easy for those who look at Washington, D.C. and see only political dysfunction to oppose providing any funding at all for the legislative branch. While they may see this bill simply as a vehicle for fattening the paychecks of congressional staff and other undesirables, we must remember the important work these support people provide in the function of the most important branch of government. Contrary to popular belief, congressional staffers work notoriously long hours for relatively little pay and help us represent the views of our constituents. Furthermore, hundreds of thousands of constituents throughout the country are helped navigate the federal bureaucracy every day by our local caseworkers working in nearby district offices. Their work here is hardly the self-enrichment many people are led to believe by populist media sources eager to post the catchiest headlines. At the same time, we must remember the many important functions this funding provides in serving and protecting the American public. Given ever-evolving security threats, this bill funds the Capitol Police, who protect critical infrastructure, as well as secure the safety of the thousands who visit Capitol Hill every day, and we thank the Capitol Police for their invaluable service. Furthermore, this bill's funding provides for the maintenance, operation, development, and preservation of 17.4 million square feet of buildings and more than 460 acres of land throughout Capitol Hill, including the House and Senate office buildings, the U.S. Capitol, Capitol Visitor Center, the Library of Congress buildings, the Supreme Court buildings, the U.S. Botanic Garden, the Capitol Power Plant, and other facilities which are needed for presidential inaugurations and other ceremonies of national importance. The responsible funding level in this bill provide adequate funding for the critical functions of the legislative branch, but also represent a step in the right direction towards enhancing government efficiency. During these times of fiscal restraint, this bill underscores the new House Republican majority's will to share in the pain of difficult spending decisions. Mr. Speaker, not too long ago it used to be that funding levels weren't rising fast enough. Then Congress was if funding levels weren't rising fast enough, then Congress was seen as cutting a program. That reality is no longer. When the new House Republican majority says we're going to cut spending, we actually reduce spending. This is the common sense understanding of the American people, which is reflected in the underlying legislation, and I will urge my colleagues over and over to support this rule and to support the underlying legislation. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman from North Carolina reserves her time. The gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Polis, is recognized.
I thank the gentlewoman from North Carolina for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I rise in opposition to the rule. Again, a rule that is not an open rule that allows for different amendments to be brought forth under this rule, as we have done with other appropriations bills. I also rise in opposition to the underlying bill. Mr. Speaker, when Americans think of Congress, they likely picture our beautiful Capitol building, its Iron Dome, the Rotunda, filled with so many tourists each day, and so many sites on the National Mall and around the Capitol complex. But that is really just the physical infrastructure that we all live in and around. What really makes Congress function or fail to function are its people, its human capital, the staff that we have on the Hill that help keep members informed and able to effectively operate in an increasingly complex world. The bill before us risks squandering Congress's human capital. The bill cuts the legislative branch by 6.4% below 2011 and 9% below 2010 funding levels. What that means is the hardworking and underpaid and overworked men and women who staff our offices and our committees, giving long hours, frequently giving up their weekends. They'll be working through next weekend, Mr. Speaker, and I think very few jobs are they actually thrilled to be informed that they actually have the weekend off. And I know that not only myself but my staff rejoiced in leadership's decision to allow us not to work this weekend. I think that that is a bar that most people assume they won't be working on weekends. Well, we assume in many cases we are, and we're actually very happy when we only have a 5-day work week. And that's the type of dedication that brings people to this line of work. This cut will result in layoffs and pay cuts for members of the staff. And I'd like to point out it doesn't ask anything of the highest paid people here, the members of Congress. We make $174,000 a year. I'm a co-sponsor of a bill to reduce that by 5%. But here we are cutting salaries for people making $30,000 and $40,000 a year without cutting the salaries of any of us who make $174,000 a year. And again, I think that's just wrong. I think it's consistent with the Republican agenda of preserving tax cuts for people making over $250,000 a year and making hard-working middle-class families earning $80,000, $100,000 a year dig deeper and pay more by cutting student loans and programs that they benefit from. So it shouldn't come as any surprise that this legislative appropriations bill is consistent with that, in that it asks great sacrifices at a time that we all agree our country has to cut back, but it asks great sacrifices of those making $30,000, $40,000 a year and takes nothing away and demands nothing of those who are earning $174,000 a year, namely the members of Congress themselves. Another concern about this bill is instead of strengthening security in the wake of violence against members, including the events in Tucson several months ago, instead of investing in inspectors, they've slashed into this proposal every operation under the legislative branch except for Capitol Police, but including the Sergeant-at-Arms office. And again, this represents a potential physical threat to members at a time when, unfortunately, our national discourse has become more divisive than ever. This bill also cuts the Library of Congress by 8.5%, and I want to explain, Mr. Speaker, what the Library of Congress does and how we as members of Congress rely on them. They are our objective research service. My staff and I, along with other members of this body, rely on the Congressional Research Service. We get experts on issues on the phone, bring them to our offices to gain their expertise on complicated appropriation, budget issues, peace process in the Middle East. This information is a vital part of producing sound legislation. They are our only objective source of information. By reducing their ability to supply members of Congress and our staffs with quality information, we only empower the lobbyists and the other exclusive purveyors of information in this town who will give less objective information that members of Congress and their staffs will have to increasingly rely on rather than the Congressional Research Service. The Government Accountability Office is cut by 6.4%. And I want to point out that the GAO saves money. Again, every dollar we spend to the GAO results in $4 of savings. This is an office charged with finding savings and excess and duplicative expenditures. So by cutting their ability to do that, we actually increase wasteful spending elsewhere in the budget. It's the congressional watchdog. Taking away funding from the GAO means taking away methods on how we can alert policymakers to emerging wasteful spending and wasteful programs throughout government. GAO is proven to protect taxpayer dollars. It was GAO that warned Congress about problems in the saving and loan industry. It was GAO that warns Congress about the dangers of deficit spending. If there's a looming issue that's not getting public attention but threatens public dollars, the GAO needs to be there to do thoughtful research and help Congress understand these issues. Also very concerned with the cuts to the Congressional Budget Office, a 6% cut. The Congressional Budget Office is critical to reducing our deficit. To cut Congressional Budget Office spending now, at a time when we are coming up with trillion-dollar plans to reduce our deficit, would prove that the majority does not value proper accounting or prompt consideration of important policy proposals. We want to make sure that what we are passing has cost savings, reduces the deficit, and cuts spending, and that taxpayers are protected. We also want to make sure we pass legislation as expediently as possible. And if we're cutting off funding to the Congressional Budget Office and we expect layoffs, I'm not sure that we have the taxpayers' best interests at heart. There were also amendments that were brought forth in the Rules Committee that unfortunately if we had an open amendment process we would be able to include, but were not made in order under this particular rule, including a bipartisan amendment by Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Representative Scheichert. The amendment would have provided $100,000, not of new money, but rededicated from another account, to name one of our rooms in the Capitol Visitor Center the Gabriel Zimmerman Meeting Room. Now, who is Gabriel Zimmerman? He is the first congressional staff person in this country's history to die in the line of duty. He was with Representative Giffords in the January 8th tragedy in Tucson, Arizona, that struck this country and shocked our nation and really tore through the fabric of the congressional immunity. Representative Schweikert and Representative Wasserman Schultz came together to provide a fitting memorial for a member of our congressional family that died in the line of service. Gabe Zimmerman was a loyal, dedicated public servant, and he made the ultimate sacrifice to this country as the first congressional staff person murdered in the line of duty in the history of our country. This distinction wouldn't have cost taxpayers any money, and would have recognized not only the devoted service of Gabe, but also of the thousands of other staff people on Capitol Hill, and I think would have been appropriate, particularly at a time when every member's office will be involved with pay cuts and layoffs as a result of the 6.5% cut, to show that beyond the dollars, the giving of your life and the dedication of the staffs that help keep us well informed and making decisions in the best interests of the country is appreciated by the institution of Congress as a whole. I therefore oppose the rule as well as the underlying bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Colorado reserves his time. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague from Colorado would have the American people believe that we can't make any cuts in spending at the federal government level. But I don't believe that argument's going to go very far. The American people know that we can make big cuts in spending at the federal government level, and Republicans are making sensible cuts in spending at the federal government level. In the ledge branch, it's not a huge amount of money that we have control over, but we believe on our side of the aisle that we should make spending cuts everywhere. Many millions of Americans have lost their jobs since the Democrats took control of this Congress in January 2007. We had a 4.5% unemployment rate when they took over, and now we've had north of a 9% unemployment rate for several years. Those people didn't have any choice at all about whether they'd continue their income or not. What we're saying is we want to continue the vital functions, those particularly that serve the American people. We want to keep this Capitol looking great. We want to keep the Capitol Police Force at full force. We want to give them the tools that they need. But everybody in Washington, D.C. can work a little harder and spend a little less money to make it easier on the American public. And that's what we're recommending in this bill. And I believe this rule does a very good job of representing the amendments that were presented to the Rules Committee. Mr. Speaker, I could go on and on about what are the problems that we're facing here, but I think it's better if I quote someone who puts some of the situation that we have here in perspective. And so I'd like to quote a Washington Post article by Charles Krauthammer, a brilliant essayist, who's put forward this article. He said, these are solutions that are being suggested, other solutions are being suggested by the man who, and I'm going to quote throughout, Mr. Speaker, and I'll tell you when I'm ending my quote, ignored the debt problem for 2 years by kicking the can to a commission, promptly ignored the commission's December 2010 report, delivered a State of the Union address in January that didn't even mention the word debt until 35 minutes into the speech, delivered in February a budget so embarrassing it actually increased the deficit that the Democrat-controlled Senate rejected it 97-0, took a budget mulligan with his April 13 debt plan speech, asking Congress how this new budget framework would affect the actual federal budget. Congressional Budget Office Director Doug Elmendorf replied with a devastating, "We don't estimate speeches. You can't assign numbers to air." The flip-flop is transparently political. A clever strategy it is. Do nothing and invite the Republicans to propose real debt reductions first, and when they do, voting for the Ryan budget and its now infamous and courageous Medicare reform demagogued them to death. And then up the ante by demanding Republican agreement to tax increases. So first you get the GOP to seize the left's third rail by daring to lay a finger on entitlements. Then you demand the GOP seize the right's third rail by violating its no tax pledge. A full spectrum electrocution. Brilliant. And what have been Obama's own debt reduction ideas? In last week's news conference, he railed against the tax break for corporate jet owners 6 times. I did the math. If you collect that tax for the next 5,000 years, that's not a typo, 5,000 years, it would equal the new debt Obama racked up last year alone. To put it another way, if we had levied this tax at the time of John the Baptist and collected it every year since, first in shekels, then in dollars, we would have 500 years to go before we'd offset half the debt added by Obama last year alone. Obama's other favorite debt reduction refrain is canceling an oil company tax break. Well, if you collect that oil tax and the corporate jet tax for the next 50 years, you will not have offset Obama's deficit spending for February 2011, end quote. Mr. Speaker, there you have it. Liberal hypocrisy exposed in another brilliant Krauthammer essay. The choice before the American people is clear. We can either continue accommodating the passions of the liberal elite in cementing a bloated dependency state fueled by job-crushing tax increases, or we can trim spending so private sector employers and innovators who are the real creators of wealth can do what they do best in healing the wounds of unsustainable government largesse. Mr. Speaker, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle simply cannot stand any kind of cuts. What they want are tax increases and continued irresponsible spending. Republicans are bringing a different message, a message from the American people. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman from North Carolina reserves her time. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield 3.5 minutes to the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lee.
Gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lee, is recognized for 3.5 minutes.
I want to thank the gentleman for yielding and also for his leadership. I rise in opposition to this rule and in opposition to the underlying bill. As a member of the Appropriations Committee and former Vice Chair of the Ledge Branch Subcommittee, I am deeply saddened by Republicans' ongoing efforts to weaken and dismantle our democracy. The Ledge Branch Appropriation Bill is simply an inadequate and misguided bill. We must not gut one of the co-equal branches of government. We should be working to ensure that we are strengthening and preserving the most direct voice the American people have in our government, the legislative branch, especially the House of Representatives, the People's House. Passing this bill will undermine one of the fundamental building blocks of our democracy, and it will weaken our nation. Failing to provide adequate resources to the Ledge Branch will mean that all of our congressional offices, both here and in our home district, will face cuts in staff. The constituent services that we provide would suffer right when our people need them the most. Our constituents rely on our staffs to help us develop sound legislation and to provide constituent casework. Our constituents rely on them to keep them informed about the complex and incredible diverse issues that face our nation each and every day. Now, I worked as a staffer for my mentor and predecessor, Congressman Mayor Ron Dellums, so I know very well how hard staffers work to help us represent the American people. These staffers are paid much less. They work more hours than most public employees, not to mention the private sector employees. We need to keep in place the resources necessary to attract the best and the brightest to public service. When you gut this budget, you are creating more unemployed people who will need to go on unemployment compensation. This is an example of the policies that Republicans are putting forward to create more unemployment and a non-responsive government. It is vital that our district offices and our Washington offices are fully staffed to make sure that our constituents, this is about our constituents, that they will continue to have access to the services so that they don't just get hung out there once again, because in this hard economic time, many, many people are desperate and they need our help. This is just another signpost on the road to ruin during this good luck Republican Congress. This bill says good luck to finding a job. It says good luck to finding affordable health care. This bill says good luck to keeping your home and your family intact. Good luck to feeding your family and your children. When the public demands, as they should, constituent services and help, this bill says good luck to our constituents. Representative democracy is really on its way out the door. Casework will be greatly diminished with these unrealistic budget cuts. Bills like this clearly show the Republican agenda for what it is. It's really good luck. You are on your own. Let me ask members to please oppose this bill, because this is not good. It's not good for our staffs. It's not good for our constituents. It's not good for the country. Thank you, and I yield the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman from California yields back her time. The gentleman from Colorado reserves. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield 3 minutes to my distinguished colleague from Texas, Mr. Sessions.
The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Sessions, is recognized for 3 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, and I want to thank the distinguished gentlewoman from North Carolina who sits right next to me in the Rules Committee and has for a number of years, and I appreciate not only her leadership but her service. Mr. Speaker, I want to stand up just as a member of this body. We're all equal representatives in this body, and I do recognize that there are people that come down here and talk about all the layoffs that will occur and all the hard times and people losing their insurance and all the dramatic things that will happen. Mr. Speaker, we need a 6% cut. We need a 6% cut because we've been receiving outlandish increments of increases for a number of years, including the first year, I believe, that Speaker Pelosi was in a 10% increase. Mr. Speaker, the American people are having a tough time. But the American free enterprise system, when faced with these opportunities, and I think it's what will happen in our offices, we're all going to look at each other and instead of laying somebody off, we'll all understand there's not enough money to go around and we're going to have to all take a sacrifice. That's what I intend to do in my office, and I hope my employees will understand that. This is going to mean some changes, and sometimes change is hard. But just to continue to receive more money because the taxpayers who we control the money, that taxpayers would expect us to just answer every one of their questions and do every one of their things is an outlandish example of a government out of control. We need to make sure that our offices are just as responsible as other areas of the government. It's time to cut back. It's time that we take a hit. It's time that we join with the rest of the American people and understand these are difficult times. These are difficult times because government is too big, costs too much money, listens too little, and now is inadaptive to the hard time themselves. Mr. Speaker, I say let's vote for this legislative appropriations bill and let's cut the amount of money that we have for ourselves in the House of Representatives. A 6% cut helps lead the way, and we can do that. That's what Republicans are, why we're in the majority. We can make tough decisions in difficult times. I yield back my time.
The gentleman from Texas yields back his time. The gentlewoman from North Carolina reserves. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
I'd like to inquire as to whether the other side has any remaining speakers. I'm prepared to close.
We have no remaining speakers, and we'd be happy to close. Thank you, Mr. Polis.
The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Now, again, I know how my colleague from Texas and my colleague from North Carolina have discussed how this is how tough these economic times are and how Congress needs to tighten its belt, and that's true. But where is the actual belt tightening for members of Congress ourselves? What are members being called upon to sacrifice? Did we cut our own salaries to help spare layoffs for staff people making $25,000 a year? No. And how about the many members of Congress who proudly talk about living in their offices? Are they going to start paying rent? They're essentially living rent-free on the government dime. They use electricity, water, and other taxpayer-paid-for resources. We have members of Congress who are squatters in government buildings. And as a businessman, I can tell you that if I owned a piece of commercial real estate and decided to start saving money or rent by living in my office, I'd be violating the law. So don't tell us that we're being frugal by living in our office. We're living free at taxpayers' expense, any member who does that. And how about the cars that members lease? I don't know too many Americans who have jobs that give them a free car to use however they choose, but members of Congress have that benefit, and many abuse it with car leases that cost as much as $1,000 a month or more. Now, I appreciate there's an amendment on this issue, but those car leases should be eliminated in this bill, not capped at $1,000. Members would still be permitted to have cars that cost $950 a month paid for by taxpayers. At the same time, we're slashing salaries of staff people making $25,000 or $30,000 a year. In difficult economic times, it makes sense to cut back on everything. It makes sense to cut back on our own perks before laying off hardworking employees. Congress chose not to do this with this bill, and the closed process associated with this bill does not allow us to bring these proposals forward. When it comes time to cut, the majority has said, hit the little guy, leave the big guy alone. Hit the person who can least afford to go without. Talk about shared sacrifice right up until it involves giving up something that benefits you or your friends. If you vote for this bill, Mr. Speaker, please tell me that you're willing to make the hard choices about the budget for the good of the nations. We've made the easy choices. This bill cuts members' day-to-day's ability to effectively represent constituents while leaving all of the perks of office untouched. I strongly urge a no vote on both the rule and the bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Polis, yields back his time. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't think that members of Congress should be extravagant in their spending in any way whatsoever. But I think it's up to the voters to hold those members responsible for what they do. If there's a member that's leasing a car that's paying an exorbitant amount of money, then the voters should turn that person out if they think they're wasting their money. I would certainly think that person's wasting his or her money. That's up to the voters to take care of. We're doing our part here in the Congress. We are balancing between making sensible cuts and making sure that the public is well served when it visits Washington, D.C., and the public should be well served by the individual members. And I hope that if there are abuses on the part of any member of Congress, no matter which party he or she belongs to, that the voters will look into that and take care of that person. But that is not our exact responsibility here. Our responsibility is, as it is everywhere, is to allow a certain amount of money to be spent in the members' offices and then hold each member should be held individually responsible. Mr. Speaker, we've discussed at great length today why America needs this rule and this bill. Voting for these measures will allow the House to continue its work toward resolving the debt crisis currently gripping the nation. As we continue this debate, we must remember the simple truth that tax increases have been tried before and led us to the mess that we have made today. We should not be raising taxes because tax increases do nothing more than fuel parasitic, wasteful government spending. We're cutting the spending for the ledge branch in a very responsible way, and that's what we should be doing. But it's past time that we pursue an innovative idea, one that's unparalleled in modern American history, and that's cut spending and shorten the long arm of government that's currently choking economic prosperity, and that's what's happening in every appropriations bill that we're passing. As we rapidly approach our federal debt ceiling, our economy is struggling, people are looking for jobs. Americans crave accountability and belt-tightening in Washington and need the federal government to stop draining job-creating resources from the private sector to fund misguided adventures in social engineering. They demand action and they demand answers. H.R. 2551, for which this rule provides consideration, reflects the House Republicans' majority's unending commitment to restore fiscal discipline that is so long overdue in this city. It represents a sensible balance between the vital need for budget restraint and funding the critical functions of the legislative branch. Without compromising the safety or security of critical infrastructure, this bill further trims the fat and encourages efficiencies while demonstrating that we're not immune to feeling the effects of much-needed spending cuts that are so desperately needed throughout our bloated federal bureaucracy. It is for these reasons that I urge my colleagues to vote for the rule and the underlying bill so we can begin to restore the trust Americans have in their federal government. I yield back the balance of my time. I move the previous question on the resolution.
Gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Fox, yields back her time. Time having been yielded, without objection, the previous question is ordered. The question is on adoption of the resolution. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The noes have it.
With that, Mr. Speaker, I request a recorded vote.
Does the gentlewoman from North Carolina ask for the yeas and nays?
Yes, sir.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, this 15-minute vote on adoption of House Resolution 359 will be followed by a 5-minute vote on adoption of the House Resolution 358.
A couple of procedural votes now. This one on the rule that will guide debate on $3.3 billion in legislative branch spending. The bill cuts funding for the House, the Library of Congress, and most other agencies under the legislation by about 6%. Only the Capitol Police escapes the budget cuts. The breaking news headline in the Washington Post says Obama in talks over plan to cut debt by $3 trillion. And the headline in Politico, Boehner-Obama talk big deal. The article goes on to say President Obama and House Speaker Boehner are making a last-ditch effort to strike a grand bargain on slashing the deficit and raising the debt ceiling days after that idea appeared to be dead, according to people familiar with the talks. After weeks of winding negotiations, the White House and GOP leaders are discussing a deal with changes to entitlements and a promise to do tax reform. We spoke with a reporter for more.
Dan Friedman is a staff writer at National Journal. How are the discussions on the debt ceiling going between President Obama and congressional leaders?
There's a lot happening. The White House and House Republican leaders, and you're seeing reports sort of saying this out, are talking about a deal that would cut about $3 trillion is the number that's been floated over 10 years, mostly in deficit cuts. That's kind of the latest development. The White House and I think Speaker Boehner's office denied reports that agreement, that proposal there was almost a deal on that. They were close to a deal, but that is under discussion. A lot of people here have said, and that may be something that Speaker Boehner is presenting tomorrow when he talks to his caucus.
What's the status of the McConnell proposal?
It remains a backup, but obviously the White House and most members of Congress would like a bigger proposal to be what winds up being enacted. But the McConnell-Reed proposal is one of a couple potential backups out there. Another potential backup might be just a smaller agreement worth, say, $1.5 trillion that would extend maybe 6 months or a little less. The debt ceiling. The issue with that is the White House had said they would veto that.
Would this plan involve a default then?
No, all these plans would avert default, so that's the benefit. And the benefit, I think, of having multiple plans, of having a fallback or two fallbacks, is that more ways to avert default.
In the meantime, the Senate started debate on a House-passed bill earlier today that is proposing to solve the debt and deficit. How much support is the Republican proposal expected to get in the Senate? That, of course, is run by Democrats.
It will get strong Republican support and probably no Democratic support, so it'll fail on close to a party line vote.
Senator Reid's expecting weekend sessions in the Senate. What are you anticipating will happen this coming weekend?
Well, they'll vote on that proposal, the so-called cut, cap, and balance proposal on Saturday. It may be that on Sunday and probably on Monday, like today and probably tomorrow, that they're not really going to be doing anything on the floor. They're remaining in session at the moment is mostly just a symbolic step. to demonstrate to Americans how serious senators are about resolving the debt ceiling issue.
Dan Friedman is a staff writer at National Journal. We thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
In the interview, we heard about Speaker Boehner, one of the players in the negotiations. At a briefing today, he said that House Republicans are willing to compromise on a budget deal to increase the government's ability to borrow, as long as the package does not include tax increases.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning.
Happy Thursday.
Thank you.
I'm trying to convince myself. Republicans continue to make job creation our top priority. This morning, the House Committee on Education and the Workforce is considering a bill that would prohibit the National Labor Relations Board from where an employer can or cannot locate jobs here in our country. In South Carolina, we've seen how this one agency can block thousands of good-paying jobs and having a chilling effect on employers all across our country. And when asked about this recently, the President said, well, I don't want to get into the details. Well, the House has gotten into the details, and the House intends to act. I appreciate the committee's efforts to help get the government out of the way and to promote a better environment for private sector job creation. Also this week, the House passed our cut, cap, and balance legislation that represents exactly the kind of balanced legislation the President has talked about. It provides him with a debt limit increase that he's requested, but it gives families and small businesses the real spending cuts and reforms that they're demanding without any job-crushing tax hikes. What this legislation also shows that it's not only important to avoid default, it's also important that we take a meaningful step toward real deficit reduction. This means in addition to cutting and capping spending now, there should be real structural reforms to our entitlement programs, and there will be no tax increases. Legislation that meets this test would be the best approach to help create jobs and get our economy moving again. With all that's at stake right now, it's not enough to wish or to wait for a solution to materialize. And whatever you want to call that approach is certainly not leadership. Republicans have laid out a responsible and detailed path forward, and the House has passed it. The Senate should now pass cut, cap, and balance. And it's already cleared the House with bipartisan support, and I'm hopeful that the Senate will do so as well. Listen, the ball continues to be in the President's court, and it's been there for some time. If we're going to avoid default and prevent a downgrade of our credit rating, and if we're going to create jobs and jumpstart the economy, I think he needs to step up and work with us on the spending cuts and reforms that the American people are demanding.
Speaker Boehner, I know you have a lot of members who don't like the idea of a compromise here or who don't even want to raise the debt ceiling. Have you told them that any deal is going to have to involve some compromise? Have you prepared them for that?
I have.
Mr.
Boehner? Reverend Norquist today indicated that letting the Bush-era tax cuts expire does not amount to a tax increase. Does that help your efforts to reach a deal here?
I'll let you and the other pundits decide what it means, but listen, I've never voted to raise taxes, and I don't intend to.
Speaker Boehner,
do you see this as a possibility that we could get to August 2nd and not have something done?
That would not be my goal in any way, shape, or form.
Understood. Is it a possibility? We're 12 days away. Are we in danger of that happening?
I do not. I believe that the Congress must act before August the 2nd, and I hope that we're prepared to do that.
Speaker Boehner, Speaker, on Tuesday, President Obama endorsed legislation that repealed the Defense of Marriage Act, which would be open to bringing this legislation for a vote over the course of the 112th Congress.
The Congress has acted on this issue some number of years ago, and I think what the Congress acted on in a bipartisan way and is the law of the land should remain the law of the land.
Speaker Boehner, is tax reform under discussion between the meetings between you and the President?
Well, I think I'll keep the contents of my discussions with the President, between the President and myself. It would be, listen, I always believed that keeping the lines of communication open were important. And frankly, I think it would be irresponsible on behalf of the Congress and the President not to be looking at backup strategies for how to solve this problem. But in the meantime, the House has acted. We've passed our cut, cap, and balance bill, and it's time for the Senate to act.
Tax reform strategy. Do you believe that letting the Bush high-income tax cuts expire next year would be raising taxes?
I believe that would be raising taxes.
Mr. Speaker, at the end of the vote after cut, cap, and balance the other night, Jim Jordan was one of the leaders of this effort. He said, when asked if there could be a compromise, he said that was the compromise. Do you sense that some of your members are locked in and they cannot compromise? They can't go off of the cut, cap, and balance position?
Well, I'm sure we've got some members who believe that, but I do not believe that would be anywhere close to the majority. At the end of the day, we have a responsibility to act. And we have two problems. We have a debt ceiling that has to be raised, and if we don't deal with the size of our debt, our credit rating is going to be downgraded. If the United States of America's debt rating gets downgraded, every interest rate in America will go up. It is important for us to act on both fronts if we're serious about getting our economy going again and growing jobs. Thanks.
The House continues to vote on the rule that will guide debate on legislative branch spending, including the Capitol Police, the Library of Congress, and the Congressional Budget Office. On the other side of the Capitol today, Senator Chuck Schumer spoke on the Senate floor, saying that the head of Americans for Tax Reform, Grover Norquist, has given his permission for Republicans to let millionaire tax breaks expire without violating the anti-tax pledge, saying his group would not consider it a tax increase if the Bush-era tax cuts were allowed to lapse after 2012. At a briefing today, Congressman Steny Hoyer was asked what qualifies as a tax cut.
I thank you for being here. I wanted to have this brief press availability after our whip meeting. I asked Governor Martin O'Malley, who is not only the governor of my state and my good friend, but also chairs the Democratic Governors Association of our state. I asked Governor O'Malley to come to be with us this morning to discuss the effects and the ramifications of our failure to extend the debt limit and to ensure that America can pay its bills. He, in league with our governor, our fellow governor from Virginia, I know has also expressed his great concern that we not address the ability of the United States of America to remain creditworthy and pay its bills. Americans expect their country to meet our obligations. It is a moral obligation and it is a legal obligation. Surely Americans want us to facilitate that end. I am hopeful that our Republican leadership in the House and the Republican leadership in the Senate will work together to effect policies which will allow America to be the continuing credit-worthy nation in the world. But we talk about that in terms of global effects. But we also need to talk about it, and that's what Governor O'Malley talked about it, in terms of the local effects on our states and our citizens in every one of our states. So I thank the governor for being with us. He spoke very effectively and pointedly to our caucus. Our caucus was very impressed, and I'm very pleased that he would join us this morning. I'm pleased now to yield to the governor of Maryland, the chairman of the Democratic Governors Association, Martin O'Malley.
Mr. Leader, thank you very, very much. Congressman Hoyer, thank you for everything that you're doing at this defining moment in our country's history. In the course of the next several days, we're going to determine as a nation whether we still have what it takes as people of goodwill to forge a consensus to move forward. And that's indeed what we need to do. We need to move forward with the goal of job creation, and the way forward is a balanced approach. Governors throughout our United States understand that a balanced approach is what's required in order for us to create jobs and expand opportunity and move our country forward. Whether we're Democrats or we're Republicans, all of us strive to protect our own bond ratings in our states, to balance our budgets, to have a balanced approach that moves our people forward, that creates jobs. And that's why all of us, whether we're Democrats or Republicans, are greatly concerned about the adverse impact on job creation and saving jobs that would happen if extreme members of the Republican Party needlessly drive our country either into a default or into massive public sector cuts that are shoved down upon states. We need a balanced approach, and I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic that people of goodwill in both parties will come together to accomplish this goal. And the governors of the country want to be part of this solution. We believe that we can save $100 billion in Medicaid by doing a better job of aligning the incentives among those citizens that are duly eligible in Medicaid and Medicare. We believe that there's opportunities here for people of goodwill from both parties to come together. Notwithstanding the things that have divided us, the fact of the matter is every person of goodwill, whether Democrat or Republican, should want to see our country recover from this recession, create jobs, save jobs, and move forward into better times. And Mr. Leader, I'm confident that with your caucus and with people of goodwill that we can find that balanced approach. The danger that we face right now is this: our jobs recovery is fragile, and there are two ways to kill that jobs recovery. One is by needlessly driving our country into default. We need to pay our bills. The other is with massive public sector cuts. There is a third way, a more balanced way, and that is the way that we need to come together to forge, as not just as Democrats or Republicans, but really as Americans. We need to create jobs. We need to save jobs. That's our primary goal, and the way forward is a balanced approach.
I thank the Governor for his observations. He was very compelling in our caucus. In closing, let me say, in terms of a balanced approach, which we have been working towards, obviously a balanced approach is represented by a number of commissions, by the 6 senators who made proposal, but there have been other balanced approach put forward for consideration, which involve both, yes, restraining spending, but not doing so in a way that will undercut our ability to get our economy growing and creating the jobs that Governor O'Malley talked about, making sure that our people have the opportunities that they need and want for themselves and for their children, but also to have revenues which will enhance our ability to invest in our future. Our President said we need to out-innovate, out-educate, and out-build our international competitors. If we do not do that, if we undermine investment in the future, our kids will not have the kind of future they want. Now, I would like to call your attention to a Washington Post editorial that I read today, because I think it is particularly important as Republicans who signed a pledge to Mr. Norquist, saying that they would not in any way deal with revenues. I think Mr. Norquist has made a very, very important statement that I hope that they each take into consideration. In the Washington Post editorial, it says this: the cost of extending President George Bush's tax cuts for another decade could be pursued without being accused of breaking their promise, said Grover Norquist. Now, the quote is this: not continuing, this is Mr. Norquist, a quote, not continuing a tax cut is not technically a tax increase. That, of course, was discussed when they were talking about ethanol tax benefit in the Senate. But I am hopeful that Speaker Boehner, who has indicated he wants to have a large, grand design, will be able to pursue that in a balanced way so that we can put our country on a sound fiscal path and, as importantly, bring our country out of this deepest of recessions that anybody has experienced since the Great Depression will be a plan that we can implement, agree upon, and do so in the next few days. Thank you very much.
Can you answer, do you think, you talk about lawmakers of goodwill coming together. You're in these negotiations. Are Republican leaders, Cantor and Boehner, negotiating in good faith? And do you think Republicans are of goodwill, and are they going to be, do they want to actually reach a deal by August 2nd?
Let me respond first, and then I'll yield to the governor. First of all, as I said, I think the Speaker has made it very clear in his discussions with President Obama that he thought reaching a balanced result, making sure that we do not default, and ensuring that the economy grows is his objective. I take him at his word. It is now, hopefully, going to be possible for him to lead his party toward that end in cooperation with the President of the United States, with the leadership of both parties in the United States Senate, and the leadership of my party in our House. So I give him credit for articulating a desire to get to an end that I think is important for our country. Governor?
I believe that there are some members of the Republican Party who, in order to defeat President Obama in the next election, would like to kill the jobs recovery now, either by default or by massive sudden cuts to public sector jobs. Having said that, I believe that a majority of public servants in the proud party of Lincoln want what's best for our country and would like to see our country move forward, would like to see our country start creating and saving more jobs again. And that's really the resonant space that we need to find as the great and diverse people that we are. We may differ on approach, but I think the main goal that members of the majority of the members of the party of Lincoln desire is to see our country move forward. And some of the recent polling that was in one of my favorite daily periodicals, the Washington Post, they pointed out that almost 50% of registered Republicans believe that a balanced approach is what's required on revenues and spending. Overwhelming majorities of independents and overwhelming majorities of Democrats. But certainly, if half of registered Republicans believe a balanced approach is what's required, certainly there's at least that large a number of Republicans in Congress of goodwill who can find a way forward. Governor McDonnell in Virginia, his state, like Maryland, is a state that has defended, maintained, and made the tough choices necessary to have a AAA bond rating. On both sides of the Potomac, Maryland's AAA bond rating and Virginia's AAA bond rating is threatened by our potential inability to pay the bills of the United States, the wealthiest republic on the planet. There's no need for us to go into default. There's a balanced way forward, and we need to find it.
Let me just say,
there's one more vote in this series after this one. The U.S. Senate is spending the day on the Republican debt reduction plan called Cut, Cap, and Balance. The measure passed here in the House earlier this week with a vote of 234 to 190, with 5 Democrats voting for it. The Senate is considering whether to officially bring up the bill. The final mission of the Space Shuttle Atlantis came to an end early this morning on the Florida coast, where it launched 13 days ago. When the wheels touched down at the Kennedy Space Center, Atlantis brought to a close the current era of manned spaceflight for the United States. Following the landing, Mission Commander Christopher Ferguson joined NASA Administrator Charles Bolden at the landing site for a ceremony marking the end of the shuttle program. You can see that after the House is out here on C-SPAN, and right now at cspan.org.
On this vote, the ayes are 239, the nays are 172. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The unfinished business is a vote on adoption of House Resolution 359, on which the yeas and nays were ordered. The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House